Welcome to CPG Vibes. No scripts,
just chat.
I'm Alex Baer.
And I'm Wade Yenny.
Each episode is recorded live, and we talk all things food and beverage, and so much more.
Feel our vibe and search for CPG Vibes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and make sure to give us a 5-star review.
If you'd like to sponsor our show with your product or service, email us at cpgvibes100@gmail.com.
Now, let's vibe.
All right, welcome to our first bonus edition of CPG Vibes, and we're going to be talking about tariffs. I don't know if we can go for the full hour. We'll see what kind of content we can talk about, but it's at least going to go probably 20 or 30 minutes. I'm in an undisclosed location. I do not own a piano, even though there is virtually one in the background. But hope everyone is doing well on this Monday. Historic times right now, both for the country and the economy, and the world, I should say. But Wade, happy Monday, my man.
Happy Monday. Coming off a nice sunny weekend to losing 20 degrees overnight and being dark and gray and rainy today in North Carolina. So excited to talk a little bit today. It's I don't know, used to signing on at a certain time, so this is all kind of, has us all mixed up. But we had the whole show crash on us on Friday, so if we can deal with that, we can deal with this, right?
Yeah, let's not say those words. We might jinx it here.
Exactly.
But yeah, well, thank you for joining us. And really, typically we don't broadcast on a Monday. It's usually almost always on a Friday. We've done it a few times on a Thursday, and I think twice on Wednesday, but never on a Monday. And really, the purpose of this episode and why we front loaded it on a Monday versus waiting till Friday is that the world is changing every single day right now with the announcements from the government, from Trump. And we just want to, clear the deck that this is not a political show. We're not going to go into whether we think it's a good thing or a bad thing. We're here to really just present the facts and, inform everyone on what we've read, what's going on, and what we can speculate will happen down the road, or even shortly. And the fact that, we're in the arena of CPG is going to be affected tremendously because of the tariffs that have already been put in place, and then potentially more tariffs that are set to be put in place this Wednesday, I believe, Wednesday at midnight, April 10th, 2025. So that's what we're going to go through. Just a couple really quick laundry list items. We're not going to be pilfering you guys with a ton of different sponsors here, but we do want to mention our back wall because we're really grateful for our back wall sponsors. And that's Feel Free, got the sweatshirt right here. Melting Forest, which is a functional mushroom energy and also de-stress. Have you tried it? Yeah, Hank Watt. So Hank Watt, what's up, my man? He said something. Can you put that comment back up there?
Yeah, he says he tried it this weekend. I'm guessing that he had good results from it. I have not tried it. I've not tried the product.
Yeah, it's a great product. I mean, it's kava root and kratom, and it's pure kratom. So it's not like adulterants, and there's a lot of really shitty kratoms out there, not to make this all about kratom here. But Feel Free uses green kratom, which is one of the most pure, no concentrates, no adulterants. It's just the leaf crushed up and put into a bottle. And that's why we have them as a sponsor, because we do like, I like the product. And Hank, make sure when you take it, only have half the bottle. There are 2 servings per bottle. So if you had too much of it, it's fine, but it might be a little too powerful. And it's an energy focus shot. So nice. Energy, focus, and mood lift. So that's Feel Free, Melting Forest, Mushroom Energy, and De-Stress. And then, of course, we have Dream Makers, which is an accelerator from Jeff Church. So, and thank you so much, all 3 of these companies, for sponsoring our episode, every episode for the next 6 months. Okay. So,
and you wanted to talk about the Friday show too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I know I was forgetting something. Thanks for keeping me on my toes here. It was an exhausting weekend. I, as you know, I went up to Big Bear for some business. I drove all the way back down my family. The elevation change kind of rocks your body, for a day or two. And then I had a wedding, not my own, another wedding on Sunday. So it just back to back to back family stuff. So fulfilling, but tiring. That's life, right? You're fulfilled, but tired.
Exactly. Right.
So this Friday, we're going to be having, and it's going to be a huge show, and we're so excited about the show. So it's the All Canada show, and it's going to be sponsored by none other than Robert Cogan with Powerful Energy Distribution. And then we're going to have some guests that are located in Canada that are business owners, entrepreneurs, and also associated with the CHFA. We're going to have, in no particular order, Steve Dontigny. He's the foundry president, and he's been involved with like Cove Soda, bringing Cove Soda from Canada to US, which is a brand that's really taking off in the US. We're also going to have two individuals from CHFA, Sonia Parmar and Jules Gorham. I might be slightly mispronouncing their names. And they're associated with the CHFA, and they work with them. And then we're going to have Megan Silk, who's the co-founder of Ginger Bug, which is a Canadian brand, and they were on Dragon's Den, which is the equivalent of Shark Tank. So all those, there are going to be 4 people from Canada, plus Robert, the sponsor. And Robert really put this whole thing together and came up with the idea. And we're proud and excited to have that episode this Friday, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, it should be very informative for brands in the U.S. looking to break into Canada, people just interested in the event as a whole. It's considered Canada's expo, if not bigger. So should be informative for everybody. But looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to post that link shortly in the next day or so, if not later today. So after this episode. Cool. All right. Well, I guess where do we start, Wade? You want to start?
Well, yeah, we again, throwing personal feelings and, relatives out the side, I think, some of the things that comes up to me and, is talking is with regards to how it's going to potentially increase people in our space, specifically natural, organic, better for you stores and retailers. Right. And so just a couple of things off the top of my head that if you haven't been thinking about, I would encourage you to start thinking about some of these things. Right. So increased cost of goods and supply chain pressures relative to, if you have a product that's imported and that can be the product itself, an ingredient in your product, or it could be, some of your packaging or something like that. Thinking about price sensitivity and demand shifts, right? Is, natural organic products already have a premium attached to them because they're more expensive to produce and whatnot. But, if prices start to, if the consumer price, and the tariffs impact your product and you pass on a price, the perception of the premium that's already there might be some questions with regards to consumers and their sensitivity on justifying those higher prices, right?
Yeah.
And opportunities, for looking at domestic sourcing, if those are opportunities, whether it's looking at some of the things that you're getting from elsewhere, but maybe this is the time to start thinking about identifying some domestic alternatives if they're feasible, at least doing some investigative work to see what makes sense. And then obviously it goes without saying, kind of goes back to the price sensitivity pieces with the competitive pressure from conventional brands. So there's going to be, they have more sophisticated and larger supply chains and, deeper pockets, if you will. And so they're going to be able to navigate that pretty quickly. And so there's going to be some more pressures coming from that side. So it's something that I think, there should be some thoughts on how to attack some of these things. And, whether you're looking at possible alternatives with means to distributions, with means to domestic sourcing, you also could think about it from a standpoint of spending, looking at your brand and storytelling and certifications and making sure that those are what you're pitching into with regards to, why are you different? Are you non-GMO? Are you organic? And being able to just beat that drum religiously that these are some of the things that differentiate us from the counterpart, and just really attaching yourself to that brand storytelling. I think those are some of the things off the top of my head, Alex, that I think about. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of really pertinent topics and things you got to think about with potential tariffs coming down the pike. I just think a lot of these brands that, there was a post from, I think, the Hot Pot Queen, I believe, that brand, where like they source a lot of stuff from Asia because those are the ingredients, those are the herbs and the spices and the specialty ingredients that make that product unique, and they have to source it basically from Asia. There's no other way to do it. And so like I think some of those brands are going to get hosed, like at least right now. They're just going to get hosed where they have to pay with the tariffs, right? They have to basically import it and then pay that tax to the US government, and there's no way around that, and then they have to raise their price, and then they raise their price, and then the sales will basically go, hopefully, who knows, maybe it stays the same, but it might go down because the price is higher, right? That's just kind of the economics 101. So there's really, I mean, right now, the way it stands is that, just for everyone to know, so everyone's up to date, is that there was a 10% tariff that went live on Saturday, right? And it went into effect 10% across every single country, basically dealing with the United States. If you're selling to the United States, or I'm sorry, yeah, if you're importing, then there's going to be that tax. And so, or the tariff. And then Wednesday at midnight, that's when, the board that he was holding in that news conference, those go into effect. But there was some news this morning, which is interesting, right? I'm, guardedly, I don't know if optimistic's the right word, but definitely guardedly good news is that there's some negotiations going on where the European Union may want to zero the tariffs. So that just came out like early this morning, right? The prime minister of the European Union, the representative, they're talking with Trump to try to zero it out. So the U.S. charges very little, doesn't impose the tariff on the European Union. The European Union also does zero to the U.S. So for any goods from the U.S. coming into the European Union. And I know that there's also negotiations right now with India, with Vietnam. Again, these are all just speculations because it's in the news.
Right.
And we don't know, like, is it fact? Is it just they're discussing right now? Is this actually going to go into effect where there is going to be a zero tariff across both sides? We don't know. But I think the optimistic part of me is hoping, and again, it's just a hope, which is not really a lot, that Trump is using this as a negotiating tactic to get the best, to get lowered tariffs from the country, and then he'll lower the tariffs or just make it back to zero. Right? I think there's going to be the 10% tariff, but the 10% is a lot better than 30 or 40 or 50%. So I think at 10%, these companies are not going to get as hosed.
Right.
So I don't know if this is a negotiating tactic and then he's going to delay it for 90 days. I don't know if this is actually going to go into effect on Wednesday and they're going to move forward with it. There's a lot of conflicting news, but I think right now the brands need to assume, if you're a CPG brand, you need to assume basically the worst case scenario, which is it's going to happen, right? You got to brace for that. Start like what you were talking about, Wade, start alternate sourcing, start looking at other countries. But again, the biggest difficulty is like, what if you depend on a certain country for a specific ingredient and then you're going to pay out the nose through that and then your price will go up? I mean, not to blab too much, but I'm looking at brands like, like one is Midday Squares, right? I think that's a really good example where some of these brands are getting hit on two fronts. They're getting hit on selling into the US, which is 70, 80% of their business. And then they're also getting hit on sourcing cocoa. Right. So like I looked at 3 or 4 countries, and we're going to get to the comments here. We got Robert talking about a couple things. And so what's up, Robert? That with cocoa, Peru, Brazil, and places, like Ghana and Africa that have the cocoa, there's tariffs across the board. So no matter where they go to source, and then if they source from a different country, does that change the taste? Does that change the texture? So I think like the blanketed tariffs are a challenge because it's blanketed tariffs in a very complicated supply chain when it comes to food. Because with food, it's taste, it's quality, it's smell. Right. And there's certain ingredients from certain countries that have a specific taste and smell and texture. You can't just go to another country. It's not that easy. So I think that's going to be the biggest the biggest difficulties here for brands.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a little bit of this too, but kind of looking at scenarios, right? And to your point, whether it's a worst case scenario or a best case scenario, but doing some exercising with regards to planning and the impact or potential impact on your P&L. What's going to happen, and be prepared for it, right? From the volatile nature of it, right? And then thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, about the premium aspect versus conventional, and really making sure your messaging is clear on that value proposition and why the premium is worth it, just in spite of or despite price hikes and the tariffs. And then also, this is something that I think some brands can do with regards to, there are some lobbying and organizations that are monitoring the issues and lobbying on behalf of people like the Organic Trade Association, things like that. There's some opportunities there to make sure you're connected, make sure you're educated and understanding the impact on your business. But I think at the end of the day, best case, worst case, all those things, one of the things that you absolutely have to do is re-examine your business from top to bottom with regards to efficiencies. Not saying to go cut any people or trim the fat or anything like that, but really now's the time to streamline if you can, and look for inefficiencies and negotiate better terms with your suppliers. Or if you're going out and you're making pitches, making sure that the retailers you're going after are going to have some ROI for you, and or hold them with negotiating as far as trying to get either cut the free fill, cut it in half, do something, right? And really just making sure you're doing all these things that can help impact your bottom line, and not leaving any stones unturned. Just being proactive, and not wait if it's going to be a best case or worst case scenario, but preparing yourself whichever way things go, that you've done some preliminary work.
Yeah. And I think like cutting the fat, like, what you're talking about is you have to focus what's in your control. Like, what can you cut? What can you reduce? And it's going to really force a lot of entrepreneurs to do this exercise, which is, I'm looking at every fucking thing in my business, from people and you may have to lay someone off. It sucks to do that, especially if someone is doing good work and they're earning their keep. But, if you're going to be paying $100,000 extra in tariffs this year, you might have to let go of a person or two that you're paying that much, and the founder or other people need to absorb that work, right, that they're doing. And this is really, I think when something like this happens, something economical that just happens to the world, and it affects your business, affects your consumers, it forces the brands to take a really deep look at their margins. What do the margins look like? What are the percentages after trade spend, after freight, after free fills, after promotions, all these different things. So I think like out of this, explosion of lava, molten lava everywhere that could be burning everything in its path, comes fertile land, right? And I firmly believe that, like, there's good that comes out of a bad situation, or I would say a challenging situation. And that's going to be these founders that are taking a step back and saying, like, I had a photo shoot for $7,000. Maybe we don't need that anymore, right? It's not really going to bring ROI for our business. Or, I was paying, whatever, an agency this much money to manage something every month. I guess maybe we can take that in-house and save money. So I think it forces founders to take a look at their margins, take a look at their overhead, their operational expenses, and be really lean and mean. I mean, we've said this on the show, Wade, many, many times, that the growth, I think the top line margin, which is very hard to get up to this level, no bullshit, to be like 70%, like, right, the top line margin, right? That's the gross margin before all these deductions. And then after the deductions, it needs to be like 40 plus, 40, 45, 50. Because you think about it, and you do this, have you driven all the time with your clients, that you look at trade spend alone. If you're, right, a new brand emerging and trying to grow your brand, that's a 20% spend on, right, trade spend, maybe even higher. And so, like, if you're at 70 and you're a new brand, you're emerging, you're already going to be knocked down to like 40, 45, 50. And that's before freight. That's before unexpected expenses and free. So anyway, not to go off on a tangent,
No, you're right. You're right.
but
You've
yeah,
got to be looking at all those things. As like I said, leave no stones left unturned. And who
exactly.
knows? From a bright spot perspective, perhaps this might cause some brands or some people to actually do some innovation. When and reformulating or coming up with some items with local ingredients or launching new products to offset some of the cost pressures they're experiencing on brands, or items they already have. So maybe there's an opportunity to turn the challenge into somewhat of a differentiator as far as hey. I'm going to take it on the chin with this tariff and that's impacting this. But if I can produce this locally and, it's going to contribute this, to your point, this to the margin, it can offset some of those expenses. So there's a lot of opportunities. You just have to deal with the cards that you're dealt and control what you can control and be scrappy. And I think at a whole, most people that play in this space and stay in it for an extended period of time are indeed scrappy, or else, they learn to be real quick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm wondering too, like on the production side, when you look at manufacturing, which brands are going to relocate to the US to make their product? I mean, if I was Midday Squares, or any of these a Canadian brand, let's call it, it could be a brand that Robert's working with, a beverage, there's all these great beverages in Canada that he's working with, or brands from US going into Canada. But if there's a pro Canadian brand that does 50% or more of their business in the US, it's one thing to source different ingredients, but building an entire fucking facility and how long it takes. And then what if like the tariffs get taken away at some point,
Right.
and then you're like, I built this facility in the US to get closer to my customers and avoid a tariff by not shipping it across the border from Canada to US. But now the policy has changed, or there's a new administration in 3.5 years. So that's where, like, I think that's a really, and it is happening at a fast pace. Stephen Dotigny, who's going to be on our show this Friday, the All Canada show, is the biggest problem is like there wasn't a lot of warning with this. Like
Right.
there's brands that have built their margin into their production, into where they're sourcing. They had it all figured out. They had all figured out and it was humming along. And now that's been turned on its head within a very short amount of time. And they have to scramble, and it caused a lot of stress to find a new source. But can you imagine if you're making the product in Canada and then suddenly, because you're selling a majority to the US, because we have more buying power, right, than Canada, we have more people here, we consume more in the United States, like you have to relocate and have a facility in the US, or maybe even shut the one down in Canada and people lose their jobs and then start a new one in the US. So what do those companies do? And I know, I said this on our show last Friday that, with Genius Juice, we were sourcing from Thailand. And I got to look at what the tariff rate is. I think it's like 26% or 30%, something like that. I'll pull up the tariffs in a second. But I know for a fact, with inflationary pressures going on and consumers wanting something at a discount because they don't have a lot of money, it's kind of what's it called? Like a perfect storm. Like they have less money, they're losing money in the market. They want to spend less money in the stores and retail stores, but then brands have to raise their price. So it's kind of this perfect storm of things. And I know if I was still operating my brand Genius Juice, which I shut it down for those that don't know in early 2024, if I had to operate in this environment, I don't know if I would make it, like, because I was depending completely on a foreign source, which took a year to set up. It took a year to figure out and find a co-packer and a manufacturing partner to make the coconut and puree it and then bottle it at a manufacturing facility and heat treat it so that it had shelf life, and then have containers and in a freight forwarder and shipping it from there to here. Like that took a year of work. And I feel for the brands that have to like retool their entire supply chain from not only sourcing chocolate, but from A to Z. And so like, what do those people do? Right. Maybe there's no answer for that.
Right. Exactly. And Jenny said it'd be nice to see if this may encourage some U.S. farmers to add some new crops that they're normally priced out of, and if they produce them here in the U.S. So, and again, there's I see there being opportunities here. It's just a matter of, how they play out and, what bubbles up. But I think, to me, I think I'm doing all that work. If I'm in someone's shoes, I'm doing all that work, all these scenarios, and really, really looking. This is time to do self-examination. It's a time to, be prepared and just ride the wave. Right? CPG is in general is a ride, anyways.
Yeah,
This
roller
is just
coaster.
this is just going to be a little bit more tumultuous until things calm down a little bit. So got to be ready.
Yeah. What do you think? Without playing, favoritism or, picking favorites or what's going to happen, like, being unbiased is what I was trying to get at.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think the long term is going to look like with this? Like, what's your prediction? And I'll share
Hmm.
my prediction.
I think, I think whether it was Robert or someone else said, it's a negotiating tactic to just have the conversations. I feel it's probably gonna, we're gonna still have some rough times here coming up, but I think things are gonna start to level out. I think a lot of it's gonna be smoke and mirrors, and not come to fruition, and/or we're gonna back down and not enforce some of these huge numbers that you've seen. That's my, whether that's me looking through rose-colored glasses or just trying to be optimist. I think
Probably a
that's
little both, a little bit of,
a little bit of both, a little bit of both. But I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. And, a lot of it's just going to go away. But I think some of the larger countries, that have a more of a, bigger impact on us, I think we're, that might be a little bit different story, the long term strategy there, because there's more negotiating. But some of these other ones, I really truly think, are going to be a little bit not as significant as by any means what you show in front of us now. What are your thoughts?
yeah, I would agree with you. Again, it's hard to really know what will happen because it's so early and it's happening all so fast. But with the news dropping, and for those that are listening and not watching, we're displaying the chart that we displayed on Friday with all the reciprocal tariffs that Trump was showing during his news conference at the Rose Garden, and you can see that they basically like halved, almost all. I would say half of them, maybe
Mostly.
three quarters of them. They're like half of what the country's charging us for us to sell in their country. So from a high level, like if it's hard for American companies to sell their products in other countries, right, because the tariffs are so high, from a logical standpoint, it makes sense that we would need them to lower that so American companies can expand internationally. But I think, like, without getting political, this is happening really, really fast. So I
Mhm.
get the concept, from a general high level standpoint, where you want American companies to sell internationally, but the execution of it is tricky, it's fast, and it's putting a lot of people into scramble mode. And I could at least share that I feel it's going too fast. It's just very, very rushed. But when you look at, and I'll stop sharing the screen here, but when you look at the long term, let me get back to my screen so I can see. There we go. So when you look at the long term, the jury's out because it's only been a month since he started doing this whole tariff thing and the trade wars. But when this is happening so economically around the world, socioeconomically, you have really two approaches. And it kind of ties into my post this morning, where it's like you can get really upset and focus on the negative, focus on what's out of your control, or you can just take hold of what is in your control and do what you can to shore up the situation, because you don't really have a choice. I mean, unless you want to shut your business down,
Right.
which is not an option for many, many CPG founders. They want to keep going. Maybe they're finding success and they want to keep pushing. So, but like, I have some optimism that long term, hopefully it's a negotiating tactic. And ultimately, I think the ideal situation is a lot of these countries will say, okay, we're going to lower our tariffs and make it easier for you to enter our country and
Right.
to sell to our country.
Right.
And for that, like I'm not right wing, left wing. I'm all over the place. It depends on who's in office. I'm an American. I was born here. I was born in Torrance, California. I've been here for 42 years. So I'm pro American. And what is best for Americans, what is best for the country, as cliched as that says, not a cop out statement. It's the truth. And so, like, whoever is in office, whether it's Democrat, whether it's Republican, I just want them to succeed. I want them to succeed at what's best for the country to help us, to help our pocketbook, to help lower inflation, lower costs, lower interest rates, and eventually, and also help small businesses stay in business. But again, you know, I will say that the short term is going to be chaotic and tumultuous. There's no way around that. But the long term, I have a little more optimism than some other people, on LinkedIn, that I feel that if negotiations go right, we get a little lucky, and it's the good timing, that maybe we can get some favorable terms here for the United States. But it's too early to tell. Jury's still out. Jury's still out on that.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. So it's an interesting time, and and looking at the stock market, it kind of balanced out today. It did still go down. I'm actually looking at it right now. It's 2:06 p.m. So the market is closed. I'm gonna log in. I've been checking it all day. I don't know about you.
No, I haven't. I've been pretty tied up today, but I have not seen it.
It's down 349 points. That's a lot. That's a far cry from the 1,500 to 2,000 points it was dropping. And we have some positive news with some potential negotiations. So I don't know. My advice to anyone on LinkedIn is, I guess don't rush to conclusions too much. Let's see what happens. Let's give it more time. But it's still not taking anything away from these brands.
Right.
That they're going through a lot. So.
Yep. Be prepared.
Be prepared and do what's in your control.
Right.
Is really the most important thing. So anything else? We covered a few topics.
No, I think that's it. Otherwise, we're in overtime today, right? I mean, this is, do we get time and a half for this?
Yeah, gotta get something. It's time and a half of zero is still zero. So.
Exactly. Good point.
Yeah, but we're doing this for the community. When there's big news that hits, and there's a lot of positive news. I mean, the CPG acquisitions have been phenomenal to see that. I mean, my client's brand, Mela, the one I worked on, their WeFunder, where they raised a total in the round of 3.4 million. That's one of our bigger clients, Mela, the watermelon water. Actually, I have their coconut water.
Nice.
I just bought it from a store. And so it's cool to see that smaller brands are being acquired that are doing 10, 15, 20 million, and the big ones. So there is positivity and positive vibes happening in the CPG environment, despite the challenges. M&A is opening up again. Capital raising is continuing, where people are getting investment. But obviously the smaller brands that are between, $1 million to 10 million, that's kind of the no man's land where it's hard to get capital. And that's why I do what I do,
Right.
Not to toot my own horn, but I do crowdfunding and help brands raise on WeFunder and Start Engine. So I think, so we'll see what happens. And I guess, thank you for joining us for this momentous Monday CPG vibes. And if there's any other big news that hits, you better believe it. We're going to have more of these, because I think once a week is not enough when news is happening every day. And we want to stay on top of it here at CPG Vibes. So thank you all for tuning in. And again, Friday is our All Canada show. I know Robert's on now, so he'll see us promote it for, I think, a third time at this point.
Right.
And we're going to have on Steve Dontigny, the Foundry president. And he recently helped Cove Soda, right, go from Canada to the U.S. Have you heard of this beverage, Cove Soda?
I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really good drink, and they're expanding like crazy out here. And then we have Sonia Parmar and Jules Gorham with CHFA. Megan Silk, the co-founder of Ginger Bug, a Dragon's Den alumni. And of course, our sponsor, Robert Kogan with Powerful Energy Distribution. He'll be on the show as well. So look out for that announcement. And everyone take care. We will see you on Friday.
See you Friday.
Take care, Wade.
See you, buddy.